There is a voice in your head right now, reading these words back to you. And if you just noticed it, congratulations. Because most people never do. That quiet narrator running in the background of your mind has a name. Scientists and psychologists call it inner speech. And it is one of the most fascinating things about being human. It is the voice that wakes up with you in the morning before you even open your eyes. It rehearses what you are going to say before a big meeting or an awkward conversation. It replays an embarrassing moment from 3 years ago at 2 in the morning for absolutely no reason. Sound familiar? Well, here is the good news. That voice is not random noise, and it is definitely not something to be afraid of. It is actually one of the most powerful tools your brain has ever developed. So let us figure out exactly what it is, where it comes from, and how to use it before it uses you. Back in the 1930s, a Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky had a fascinating theory. He believed that inner speech developed in children as they learned to talk out loud to themselves while solving problems. Over time, that external chatter moved inward and became the private voice we all carry around today. In other words, your inner voice is essentially thinking out loud, just silently. It is your brain doing its best to organize the chaos of the world around you. Researchers at the University of Nevada confirmed that most people experience inner speech for a large chunk of their waking hours. We are talking about the equivalent of speaking out loud at a pace of about 4,000 words per minute. That is a lot of talking happening inside one skull. Now here is where things get really interesting. There are actually different types of inner voice experiences. Some people have a very clear, fully formed verbal voice inside their heads. Others experience something more like compressed thoughts or feelings rather than actual words. And a small percentage of people report having almost no inner voice at all. Scientists call this condition aphantasia when it extends to mental imagery, but the voice equivalent is called anendophasia. The point is, your brain is not broken no matter which camp you fall into. It is just wired a little differently, and that is genuinely fascinating. So why does the voice sometimes feel like it is working against you? Well, psychologist Ethan Kross wrote an incredible book called Chatter, where he explores exactly this problem. He found that when inner speech becomes repetitive, critical, or stuck in a loop, it shifts from being helpful to harmful. He calls this chatter, and it is the mental version of spinning your wheels in the mud. Chatter is what happens when the voice replays failures, catastrophizes future events, or just endlessly critiques every tiny decision you make. It can spike anxiety, disrupt sleep, tank your performance, and make you feel genuinely miserable. But here is the thing Kross also discovered. The voice is not the enemy. The way you are using the voice is the problem. One of the most powerful discoveries in his research involves something almost surprisingly simple. Talking to yourself in the third person actually works. When you refer to yourself by your name instead of saying I, your brain shifts into a slightly more objective mode. Instead of saying, "Why am I so nervous?" you say, "Why is Sarah so nervous?" Or "Why is Marcus overthinking this?" Studies show this tiny linguistic shift reduces emotional reactivity significantly. It creates just enough psychological distance for you to think more clearly and act more rationally. LeBron James has talked about doing this publicly. So has Malala Yousafzai in interviews about handling fear. You are essentially becoming your own coach instead of your own harshest critic. And that changes everything. Now let us talk about another tool called distanced self-talk, which comes from the same body of research. Imagine your future self is watching you right now. That version of you has already gotten through the thing you are currently dreading. Your inner voice can simulate that perspective, and when it does, the anxiety of the present moment shrinks dramatically. This is not wishful thinking or self-help fluff. Brain imaging studies show that this kind of mental simulation activates the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for rational planning and emotional regulation. You are literally rewiring your response to stress in real time just by changing the language inside your head. Now, here is one of the most useful things you can do with your inner voice. Use it intentionally before high-pressure situations. Athletes have known this for decades, and sports psychology has documented it extensively. A review of over 50 studies published in the journal Perspectives on Psychological Science found that instructional self-talk, which means using your inner voice to give yourself specific directions, consistently improved performance on physical and cognitive tasks. Before your presentation, instead of letting the voice spiral into, "What if I mess up?" you redirect it. You say, "Step by step, I know this material, I have prepared for this, and I am ready." That is not denial. That is strategic deployment of your most available mental resource. There is also a fascinating concept from the work of neuroscientist Antonio Damasio worth mentioning here. He found that the inner voice is deeply connected to the construction of your sense of self. The stories you tell yourself internally are not just commentary on your life. They are literally how you define who you are. This means that changing the story your inner voice tells is not just a mood adjustment. It is an identity shift. And identity shifts are where real, lasting behavioral change comes from. When the voice starts saying things like, "I am someone who follows through," or "I am the kind of person who handles hard things," your behavior gradually catches up to match that story. It is one of the most underappreciated mechanisms behind lasting personal transformation. But what about quieting the voice entirely? Because sometimes, especially during deep creative work, the voice becomes noise rather than signal. Mindfulness meditation is one of the most research-backed methods for gaining conscious control over inner speech. And the key word there is control, not elimination. You are not trying to destroy the voice. You are learning to notice it, step back from it, and choose whether to engage or let it pass. A study from King's College London found that regular mindfulness practice reduced the intensity and frequency of intrusive inner speech significantly. The people in that study also reported feeling more emotionally stable and more focused in their daily lives. And here is the beautiful part. Once you learn to quiet the voice when you need clarity, you also get much better at hearing it clearly when it has something genuinely useful to say. Therapist and author Rick Hanson describes the brain as having a negativity bias built in from millions of years of evolution. Your inner voice was originally designed to scan for threats, replay danger, and prepare you for the worst. That was incredibly useful when the threats were physical and immediate. Today, the threats are mostly social, emotional, and imaginary. So that ancient survival mechanism keeps firing at things like an unanswered text message or a slightly awkward comment you made at dinner. Knowing this does not make the voice disappear, but it does help you contextualize it. When the voice goes into overdrive, you can remind yourself that this is just an old alarm system responding to something that is not actually dangerous. That single reframe, backed by neuroscience, can reduce its grip on you immediately. Here is something that might surprise you. Your inner voice is also one of the most powerful creativity and problem-solving engines you have access to. Research on default mode network activity shows that when the mind wanders and the inner voice runs freely, the brain is often doing its most sophisticated associative thinking. This is why great ideas seem to come in the shower or on a long walk. You are not being unproductive. You are giving your inner dialogue the space to make unexpected connections that focused, directed thinking often misses. So the next time someone tells you to stop daydreaming, you can tell them with full scientific confidence that your default mode network is engaged in high-level creative processing. Or you could just nod politely. Either works. So where does all of this leave us? You have an inner voice. It has always been there. It is not a glitch. It is not a symptom. And it is not something that needs to be silenced forever. It is a feature of the most complex organ ever to exist in the known universe, which happens to be sitting right there inside your head. The research from Vygotsky, Cross, Damasio, Hanson, and dozens of other scientists all points to the same conclusion. The voice becomes a problem when you forget that you are not the voice. You are the one who can hear it. And that gap, that small but infinite space between the thought and the thinker, is where your real power lives. When you step into that space, you stop being dragged along by the commentary and start directing it. You shift from passenger to pilot. You get to choose which thoughts deserve your energy and which ones you can let drift by, like clouds on a windy afternoon. That is not a small thing. That is one of the most life-changing skills a human being can develop. And the good news is you do not need any special equipment to practice it. You just need the voice you already have. So the next time you hear it chattering away, take a breath, step back just a little, and remember that the narrator is not in charge. You are. And with a little practice, patience, and perhaps a good book on the subject, you can turn the loudest critic in your life into your most reliable guide. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.